Hey everybody, Alex here, and welcome to the latest episode of Remakes and Replays. Today we're going to be talking about Street Fighter Alpha on the PlayStation 1. Now there's a whole preamble to this, because you may be like, wait, you replayed a fighting game. I must have taken you the better half of half an hour, which is true. So I did some supplementary things to augment it, but before we get into that proper, I do feel like there has to be a little bit of a background into my history with Street Fighter and why I want to make this video. Now, longtime folks may remember a long time ago, back when I was all about branding, I used to do a series called A Base to the Past, where I would just recount like a gaming memory that I had. And truthfully, they're all precious memories to me. But rewatching the specific one for Street Fighter Alpha, in today's brain set or mindset as Alex in the year, well, more gray Alex, man, that video is cringe. I am so awkward in front of the camera. And the crazy thing is, I had been doing YouTube for a while at that point. And I thought it was actually pretty comfy at that instance in time, but apparently not. So I was thinking maybe we should redo it. And then I was like, you know what? I actually haven't played Street Fighter Alpha in years. And I'm not talking like the arcade game or anything like that. I'm talking about the old PlayStation 1 version. But in that video, if you want to go back and watch it, I talk about how I discovered Street Fighter. But if you don't want to watch it, and you'd rather stick here, and by the way, I do have some show and tell items, so you may want to look at the screen every once in a while. I'll let you know when. Then I'll just recap the video here, so you don't have to watch it, because honestly, the lighting is even worse. The sound is even worse. There's no microphone or anything. So, in grammar school, I went to a Catholic grammar school as a kid, and I know some of you are already like, oh. Nah, not so much. It really wasn't that expensive back then, where you had to take out a personal loan just to send your kid to school. But what they used to do is they used to have a Halloween carnival. And whatever the 8th grade class who put on this Halloween carnival raised would determine where they would go for their graduation trip. Now, my class sucked, so we just got to take a tour of West Point, the military college, because we couldn't afford to go anywhere else. But the class of this year, I think previously they went to like DC and stuff like that. But, they would have like silly Halloween games, like bobbing for apple things, guess what's in my hand, pick a number between 1 and 10. Stupid nonsense. And you would get candy and toys, and it was like a quarter, and you would get tickets, and you could redeem them for prizes that were donations from parents, all that stuff. And then if you didn't make enough for Halloween, you got to sell gift wrapping around the Christmas season. And truthfully, my mom just bought all her gift wrap at that point. She would just give me the credit for it. So I did pretty good. But anyway, so they used to also have like 2 to 3 different tables that would have video game systems. And they limited that, actually, because otherwise everybody would just bring video game systems. So that's actually the first place I played a TurboGrafx 16. I played Bonk. I played Bonk in the cafeteria for like 5 minutes, and I died immediately. And pretty much the rule usually was you played until you lost, or you died, or you got a game over. So in this one particular year, somebody brought a Super Nintendo with Street Fighter 2. And I had no idea what this was. A bunch of kids had no idea what this was. But it was packed. It was literally like the arcade memories that every other YouTuber talks about, where people are just standing behind putting up a quarter, but in this case it's just people standing in line, just rotating in and out, people picking characters. I jumped in not knowing anything, and I picked Blanca, who ironically I cannot use at all to this day. But at that moment, button mashing, I was able to do the electricity move. And I thought I was king shit. I was like, if I just keep punching this controller, man, I'm going to take out everybody. And I had a decent win streak. But when I left, I immediately wanted this game. And I did eventually get it for Christmas, and I played the heck out of it. And I always picked Blanca because Blanca looked cool, but I was just truthfully not really good with him at all. And then eventually I settled on Ryu. And I did finally manage to beat that game, which Bison or Vega, depending on how you look at it, was a piece of shit. But the ultimate combo of hard jumping kick followed by sweep kick and then doing a throw won over everything. For those of you who don't know, the throwing mechanic in the original Street Fighter games is immensely overpowered. Like, we're talking half HP every single time. And this would eventually become a rule with my friends and I. No throws. And if you got a throw in, you had to let the other guy throw you to balance it back out. Because it was just so OP. But now, in modern Street Fighter sense, it's a good strategic move from time to time to get yourself out if somebody tries to catch you on a wake up. I don't actually know the terminology, but to me it makes sense. But I love this game so much, and I played it to death. And then when Super Street Fighter 2 came out, forget about it. Turbo, I was never really a big fan of. Growing up, I don't know why, just the speed thing. Between the butt mashing and the blisters, because honestly, I was just not good at any of the techniques in that game. But the fact that they added new characters, you were able to play as the boss characters, was insane. But when Super came out, and now we had Cammy and T-Hawk and Fei Long and DJ, this was amazing. Like, they literally expanded the roster, and all the characters now, like, Ryu looked like freaking possessed. Like, he was, like, cut and chiseled. That dude was on a dehydration train for a match like you wouldn't believe. And it wasn't gory, per se, you know, not like your Mortal Kombats and stuff like that. But it was around that time with Mortal Kombat, my parents were cool with Street Fighter because, you know, Blanca, and, you know, it was a little goofier, let's say, as opposed to these, you know, at the time, photorealistic actors on screen acting out all the moves for Mortal Kombat. Now we fast forward. I was always playing Street Fighter on and off with my friends, but I never actually owned Super Street Fighter 2. I just rented it a lot. But once we got to the PlayStation 1, and after the terrible movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme, there was a new Street Fighter series coming out called Street Fighter Alpha. Now, I truthfully had no idea what this was at the time. I just heard Street Fighter Alpha, and it was going to be debuting on the PlayStation 1. Back in the glorious days of the YouTube gaming community, it was actually a thing where you would want to buy games that you had as a kid and you had emotional attachment to. As opposed to now, and this is a little bit old manny of me, where people look at games as an investment. Whatever. So, one of the things I wanted to get was a long box copy of Street Fighter Alpha 1. The very same edition of this game that I received that very Christmas from my uncle. Now, I loved this game to death, and the timing of this game and the accoutrement that came with it were the stuff of, like, excellent memories for me. I got the strategy guide, which, and I'm going to use a reference here. I do collect art books, by the way. I tend to prefer the Japanese ones just because they tend to be more varied. Look this one up on eBay. It literally has a bunch of artwork from, like, Street Fighter all the way through and including, I want to say Street Fighter 3. But anyway, no, there's a bunch of different games in here. It's a phenomenal book. There's also some interviews in the back, which obviously I can't read. But on the strategy guide itself, which was, I think, the unofficial one, and I've actually been trying to get that for a very long time, it had this artwork on it. And the first thing that popped in my head was, why does Ryu look so different? And why is Ken rocking long hair? These characters looked incredibly different from their original designs that I was used to, which was more along the lines of this. Or even potentially, and this is where it gets really funny. Where is it? Or even this. This is a bit more modern, but, you know, like the idea of, like, that Street Fighter, Super Street Fighter 2 era. Why do they look so different? Pop in the game, and the roster is completely different. There's no Blanca. There's Ken, there's Ryu. I know who they are. I don't know who Rose is. Where's Guile? I don't see Guile. I see Charlie. I had no idea Street Fighter Alpha 1 was a prequel. It was the groundwork for how everything happened before Street Fighter 2. And presumably Street Fighter. Now, in Japan, it's called Street Fighter Zero. Here we called it Alpha because, we like the Greek alphabet, and Alpha is the beginning. Did not put any of that together at all. But what I was able to put together was this game played, it handled, and it looked incredibly different. This is when Capcom, in terms of the arcade stuff, started to go more of an anime aesthetic. And truthfully, I think it was better for it. Because this game visually looked more like a side-scrolling beat-em-up than an actual Street Fighter game. To me, at least. Everything looked way more animated, way more fluid. And the other part of it, too, is this game was actually really fast compared to what I was used to. I could do the hard kick, hard sweep, throw combo all day, every day, but it wasn't nearly as effective as it was back in Super Street Fighter 2, which is why my uncle got me the strategy guide. And in this strategy guide, they broke out combos and secrets, and there was a secret that caught my eye, where you could have Ryu and Ken team up. Same thing, 2-player, presumably, fighting against one NPC opponent. My mind was blown. This is like the stuff of legend. What sorcery are they using to do any of this? And in that original video, I called this my Street Fighter Christmas because that's really how my uncle kind of referred to it. Because he literally just drowned me in Street Fighter stuff. I got Street Fighter Alpha, I got the game. I got Street Fighter Alpha the game, I got Street Fighter Alpha the strategy guide, and I also got Street Fighter 2 the animated movie. Now, I had it on VHS. I do have the original US Manga Core release on DVD as well, but I'm showing the Blu-ray here because this actually has every version of this movie. This movie was re-released several times, and each edit, each cut is very different. This does include the US manga release under extra features if you want to watch how I watched it back in the 90s. And one of the best parts about this is that Discotheque was able to keep the original soundtrack, which had like Crystal Method, Alice in Chains, like all this 90s grungy stuff. And the disc is in the PS5 right now, but that is what the artwork looks like on the original VHS and the DVD. So if you want the original, you're looking for Ryu doing a kick in front of the Tai statue. So for this whole experience, I decided to rewatch this movie because for the longest time, this was my favorite anime. I saw this before Dragon Ball Z, so the fact that I had my favorite characters fighting was a huge rush. And this movie is truthfully nothing but nods to the games and fan service and action. It is non-stop action. Every character at the time is represented, even if it's only for a second. I did not put 2 and 2 together. Akuma is like Waldo in this movie, and he appears in the background of several different scenes. But all the super characters are in there. Cammy shows up for a minute. T-Hawk has a brief fight with Ken. Fei Long shows up. Everybody gets a moment to speak, except Akuma. But that's what was so cool, because I would have my friends over. We watched this movie over and over again. We loved it. And it was perfect. It, for the longest time to me, was the perfect video game movie, because it literally took all the fantasy, it added to it, and then it made it more, and this is where I'm stretching here, grounded in reality. It felt like the video game. It looked like the video game. People weren't throwing Hadokens all over the place. I mean, at one point, Guile throws a sonic boom, and they make it look epic. He literally cuts a building in half with it. And I was like, holy shit. This dude is one bad mother. As said by Balrog, or Bison, however you look at it. It was so great. And watching this and playing the game and flipping through that strategy guide, looking at all this beautiful artwork that I had never seen before. And then it dawned on me. This movie actually ties into Alpha because, and this is not really a spoiler, it kind of summarizes it a little bit. They give you some background to Ryu and Ken growing up. And all of a sudden, everything that I saw in Alpha made total sense. And I was watching the movie, and then I was playing the game. And then I was trying to figure out, using the strategy guide, how to eventually get to fight Bison with both characters. Which I eventually did, because at the time, I was not really good at fighting games whatsoever. It was not until several years later that one of my close friends, who we're now estranged, he was really into fighting games. He was really into the arcade fighting game scene. He taught me how to do combos. He and I labbed Street Fighter EX plus Alpha for like 3 years. We did every single challenge together, alternating back and forth. He's the one who taught me how to do 360 motions with Zangief. I could not do them for the longest time. But this was also around the time that I discovered I don't just have to play as Ryu all the time. I got pretty good with Adon. I got halfway decent with Guile. But ultimately, I would settle in on Ken. Ken has been my main ever since Street Fighter Alpha 2, actually. And that's not because I can throw Shoryukens very easy. On the contrary, as a kid, I threw them all over the place. I was your typical Ken player with the flowchart. When in doubt, Shoryuken. You got thrown, Shoryuken. You're standing up, Shoryuken. He throw a Hadouken, Shoryuken. Just keep doing that. Nah, I actually played Ken as a kicker, believe it or not. So when everybody was bitching and moaning about Street Fighter V, I was right at home with him. But man, it was so much fun back then. And you know, there's a little bit of like, I guess you could say, nostalgia for 90s anime. Because I feel like the voice actors, I didn't know who they were at the time. I'm much more into that now. But hearing Bison literally sound how I pictured him was incredible. Ken, he had a little bit of an ego. I totally got that. Ryu, silent and stoic, very few lines, great. Even the dude who voiced Fei Long, he went ahead and did the whole Bruce Lee thing to great effect. And this movie, it is pretty, even the US manga core, which is admittedly very edited, there's a decent amount of profanity in it. And there's also a very famous scene, which a bunch of you are probably saying, is he going to talk about the Chung-Li scene? Yeah, my uncle didn't know about that. He was very surprised, to say the least. But yeah, that Christmas to me, man, was just so much fun. I literally did nothing but play Street Fighter on my old PS1. And it was the 90s. It was literally right in the middle when 90s anime was really starting to come over here. You know, Japanimation, as they called it. And I was really trying to branch out and discover different ones. And I think he got me a few other movies as well. I think he got me one of the Ranma One-Half movies. He got me one of the Tenchi Muyo movies. Ultimately, I watched each of those maybe once or twice. But the Street Fighter 2 movie, I've watched countless times. Even my wife has watched it. So, in preparation for this video, I decided the best way for me to come into this, playing this game so many years later, and see if it hits any different, was for me to rewatch the movie, which I did, the unedited and the US manga core version. I replayed the PlayStation 1 game, and I went ahead on the Street Fighter collection that's on the PS4. I replayed the arcade version. And I gotta say, man, this game has not aged a day. It is still so much fun. Admittedly, the console version is incredibly easy compared to the arcade version. I went through a no continue run. Arcade, I think I got KO'd on the final boss for Ken, which is technically Ryu, twice. Got endings for both, obviously, but oh man, so good. But it does say something about 90s localization too, because the endings, you know, we're still talking those days where you would have a still image, and when they would translate to the English text, sometimes words would get cut off, so it'd be like, and then we went, and then it would have a hyphen, then NT on the next line or something like that. So it was a little campy to look at, and I was like, wow, I thought this was cutting edge. Jesus Christ. but it handles so good. It is still fast and fluid. I even went back and played Street Fighter Alpha 2 right afterwards. Oh man, I got so excited to replay this game so much. I flipped through this art book as well. And unfortunately, there is not as much Alpha 1 artwork as I would have liked. And I tried to find that strategy guide. I was actually hoping to have it for this video, but at this point, I've rewatched this movie 3 times, and I've replayed this game, I think, 3 or 4 times through. But I felt like I had to talk about it. But I want to dedicate a little bit of this towards the movie itself. The movie's great. It aged so well. I think even me loving modern anime, watching the likes of Dragon Ball Super, I have not watched Jujutsu, whatever the heck it is, Chainsaw Man, stuff like that, where the action has, like, and the animations have admittedly gotten much more fluid with technology. This is traditionally animated. A lot of the movements, there's some scenes and instances where you could tell they sped up footage. So, like, there's an instance where Ryu is basically trying to punch the shit out of Bison, and Bison's just doing this back and forth. But it's not like a Dragon Ball Z thing. They're kind of just replaying the same thing over and over again. I didn't know that. My friend told me. He's a professional animator, and he was like, yeah, they're just recycling the footage over and over again, like Hanna-Barbera. But it looks so impressive. And he's like, yeah, dude, at the time, doing stuff like we see today was incredibly hard and incredibly expensive to do. Stuff like that, cool little tricks. The backgrounds and the landscapes in this movie are super detailed, almost photorealistic. And the characters themselves look great. Chun-Li looks a little sus in a couple of scenes because they tried to make her kind of goofy, kind of not ditzy, but like a little funny. But where this movie really shines, oh my god, is the dub. It is so 90s. It is amazing for it. And Bison, who I thought was such a menace back then, he has some great one-liners. At one point, he has, like, I think it's Ken in a headlock, and he punches him and he goes, oh, 1! Like it's 1990s WWF wrestling. He goes, 2! And then he goes, 3 strikes you're out, and he throws him. What? What? And then so he has that one, and then, like, there's, I mean, maybe it's a contextual thing, because I did watch it subtitled as well, but there is a scene in the movie where Ken pretty much proposes to Eliza, and he goes, let's get married. Like question mark? And she's like, oh, okay. That's kind of how it plays out, but in English, even my wife was like, what? I feel like that was supposed to be delivered differently. But it was a thing of the time. They weren't, the tech and the way that they dub anime is not like they do today, where you have a voice director who literally gives you the Japanese context, the intonation, everything else. They were kind of just like, here's your line, you're Bison, do you know the game? No? Okay, cool, just say it how you do it. And then he goes, you're a miserable pile of excrement. Oh, so good. But there's also problems with this movie. In the Japanese version, they refer to everybody as their proper names. Bison being Vega, Balrog being Bison, and Balrog being Vega. And they have like a little dossier thing in the background of the different characters, and they all have their Japanese names, even though they're clearly referring to everybody as somebody else. Minor detail I picked up as an adult, but as a kid, I was just in awe. But even rewatching this movie, I'm still in awe that they pulled this off. It really encapsulates the series so perfectly. And when they announced Street Fighter 2 V, which is kind of like a weird 90s anime prequel where Ken and Ryu basically go around the world just fighting people. And, they incorporate it's a little goofy. It's essentially, it's a TV series, not a movie. This 90-minute movie crams in so many characters and so much action. Some scenes I wish were longer. I wish we got to see DJ a bit more, as opposed to going, you looking for the DJ. Some of this stuff I don't think would fly in today's day and age either. But, it was the 90s. Everybody was happy-go-lucky. But, truthfully for me, Street Fighter Alpha 3 is probably the one I put the most time into. It's easily the best one in the Alpha series. The one that I feel like I enjoyed the most was Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold, which I've played mostly on the PS2. Gold being just some rebalancing stuff. But Street Fighter Alpha 1, I felt that same sense of mystery replaying through the arcade mode in both versions. A game I haven't played in a while. Like, I pop in the Street Fighter 2 Anniversary Collection. I go right to Alpha 3 and I play until I lose. Sometimes I'll go into Street Fighter 3 itself because for the longest time I was a big supporter of that game when a lot of people weren't. But booting up Alpha and just seeing that amazing intro and seeing how small the roster was as an adult, I got the same vibes when I played Street Fighter 2 back at my grammar school that first time. Just seeing like 8 characters, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of people. Now it's like 8 characters, not enough people. I need more Shotokan characters. I need more Ryu and Ken clones. I need more Bison clones. I need Rose. I need Ibuki. I need Dan. I need all these different people. I need another Guile clone. Just seeing this limited roster and then watching the movie and now knowing what I know, who Charlie is, who Rose is. The lore of Street Fighter is so deep, and this was literally just scratching the surface for me as an adult. I mean, as a kid. As an adult, now I know all this lore, and I appreciate it immensely. Even if you're not a fan of fighting games, I would argue that the Street Fighter legacy is very, very important to gaming. It's very important to me as an individual because I have so many lasting memories with the games themselves, as well as with my friends. I played Street Fighter Alpha with all my friends. I played Alpha 2 with all my friends. 3, we would literally have tournaments. All of us gather around, 4 people, alternating back and forth. When Street Fighter 4 came out, and now we're in college, and a little bit graduated after, it became a drinking game. You lose, you take a shot. And eventually everybody was terrible. And one of my friends, it's actually my best friend's brother, he got so good with T-Hawk, he was like number 2 in the world. And that was because he took it a step further. He was watching Evo and everything else, and he was learning about priority and hitbox stuff and all that, and he taught it all to us. And then eventually I got to a point with Ken where he would literally tell people, if you're going to play against Alex's Ken, he's not going to throw a Shoryuken at you. He only does it if he knows it's going to land. And people are like, oh yeah, no, he'll panic eventually. Nope. Never throw one. Even a Shoryu Repa, it's always part of a combo for me. And that dates all the way back to Alpha 3, where I learned, hey, if I keep throwing Shoryukens, I'm just going to lose every single time. And he's like, and don't let him do change-ups on you. He's like, do not let him do... He literally was coaching people how to play against me, and I'm not the best player. But because I play Ken so unconventionally, it kind of confuses people. Even in the arcade, I'll never forget when I was playing Street Fighter EX plus Alpha 2 against some guy. I beat him, and he goes, you're probably the only Ken person I've never seen throw a Shoryuken. I'm like, well, it's a good move, but you're waiting for it, right? You don't know when it's going to come out with me. And I think just seeing how the Shoryu Repa and not Shoryu Repa, the Hurricane Kick and everything and Alpha and all that animation, it really gives me an appreciation because now I go back to it and I'm like, yeah, this is really where modern fighting game mechanics for me probably started. Where I was watching and I was learning, okay, with Ken, he gets a little bit more space on a medium lower kick. He also has the pump fake with his knee, just like Ryu has the straight and then he has the solar plexus punch. All this stuff started with Alpha, the beginning. And I didn't put any of it together. But when I'm replaying this and I'm going through it and my wife is watching me and I go, oh, he got me with the solar plexus. She's like, what? I was like, yeah, oh, wow. This is where it started. This game is incredibly important. Not only as a series, not only to me, but I also think it kind of steered how I tend to enjoy fighting games these days. I'm not a professional at them. I play very strange. I play it like an arcade stick with my fingers like this, but I actually can't use an arcade stick because I learned on a pad for the most part. But it's crazy to think because even to this day, I've played tons of fighting games, and I love Blaze Blue and I love Arc System Works, man. But I will always go back to Street Fighter as my personal favorite. And you could say that's nostalgia glasses. You could say it's a love of Capcom. You could say it's because I don't want to branch out. I don't give a shit. This series did a lot for me. I have so many memories with my friends, and we're talking decades. Absolute decades of memories with the Street Fighter Alpha series in particular. Because that was the one we all enjoyed the most. My friend who's in animation, he would look at this as a case study. Like, to him, it was the pinnacle. Even the anime movie, when I told him I was rewatching it for this video, he's like, oh, dude, I love that movie so much. He's like, which version? Like, he knew already. He's like, because there's 50 versions. And again, if you are interested in seeing this movie, it is on Amazon Prime, at least as of this recording. But you're better off just getting the Blu-ray because it has every single version on it with all the different music tracks, subtitles, whatever you want. But anyway, I've been Alex. This has been Replays and Remakes. And yeah, Street Fighter Alpha still hits the same. Still an incredible game. Take care.